welcome everybody. I'm delighted to have with me today for our first digital leadership chat, my good friend Tim Wheeldon, who is Chief Operating Officer and one of the founders of Fluent Money. Fluent, for those of you who don't know, are the UK's largest secured loan and mortgage broker, currently employing over 450 people. I had a little look on Trustpilot, and you've got an excellent 4.8 rating from over 5,000 reviews, which in that commercial environment is excellent work. Tim started the business back in 2008 with partners Kev Hindley, Paul Ford, and Simon Moore. So, welcome, Tim. How are you today?
Not bad at all, thanks. Nice, good to see you.
Jolly good. So, I'm sure what people would love to hear about, first of all, is your journey from those early days of Fluent Money to the business it is today. So tell us a little bit about the journey and how you got where you are now.
No problem at all. It just seemed like a long time ago when we set it up. But the starting point for the business actually was unfinished business. So we'd sold a previous brokerage to a PLC, and it didn't really go particularly well in terms of a relationship with them, which was a real shame. So we felt like we had unfinished business, and we set another brokerage up again a couple of years after we'd done that sale. So it wasn't exactly starting from scratch. The previous business we got to give you an idea of scale, we got to about 120 staff, that sort of number. We set the new business up with 20-ish people, all of whom we borrowed from the previous business to set it all up. And we set up, we had what we call, people said to us, you had immaculate timing when we sold, and then they said timing wasn't so great when you set up, because we were right in the middle of credit crunch. So as a brokerage, the one thing you need is lenders to be able to offer whose products you then offer out. We started trading on the first day. I think we had 9 or 10 lenders. Within 3 months, we were down to 2. So
you were pretty much one of the last guys standing at that time. I mean, it literally wiped out the market, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And I think there was a sense in the market that if we decided to call it a day or shelve it for a couple of years, the market would have stopped. So yeah, we were the last man standing in that market, and it was a nervous time. We were having to bankroll the business and the staff costs out of our own pockets, myself and Kevin, and it was nervous times. But there's a lot of people who we'd employed whose livelihoods depended on us, depending on the business, and we thought, you know what, I think we can ride this. So we did. So we rode through the worst times in credit crunch, came out the other side. Lenders came back into the market again, and we grew in that market. Now, at the time, one of the benefits of credit crunch, if you like, was that when you are paying the entire business costs out of your own pocket, one of the things you do is drive for efficiency. So part of the efficiency drive, of course, is the how can tech help? How can tech help to make us more efficient and keep costs down? And so that was a part of our ethos going through credit crunch and coming out of it as well. And we could see as
your background, though, Tim, you're not a techie per se yourself, are you, or is that your original?
I've always had an interest in software. So I used to work for a business a number of years ago, and I had the good fortune to repossess a very, very old computer. And I actually taught myself a little bit of programming in one of the very, very early non-visual languages. And then when it came to the brokerage business we're talking about here, I wrote the CRM system. I went out and bought a book from, I can even remember what it was, PC World in Bolton. And I bought a book that cost £35, and it was Teach Yourself Microsoft Access in 30 days. And that's how I built our first CRM. So I was never a classically trained developer. I was self-taught. And of course, as soon as the business became of a certain size, you've then got to hand it over to the professionals. Not classically trained myself. So
as a leader, you understand the digital side of it, what needs to be done, even if you don't know the technicalities of how to do it.
You're right. So I think, tech's moved on considerably, so I'm not allowed to write code anymore because our CTO won't let me. But I think the benefit of having had that ground level access to the system gave me two things. First of all, it gave me an understanding and a knowledge to a certain degree of how tech works, how it's able to work, and how it works with the business. But of course, having the business approach to the tech as well meant that I could see how I wanted a process to run and how I wanted tech to support that process and how I could see tech supporting that process. So that gave me a really good background in terms of driving a technology message, if you like, into the business and having technology support what it was that we did. So yeah, there was a big benefit from that.
So when you were sat there then, day one back in 2008, yourself and the other three guys, was it very defined? Okay, we want this to be a. Did you see yourself as a technology business, or did you see yourselves as a loan and mortgage company?
So what we always saw ourselves as a neither. So we saw ourselves as a facilitator. Okay, fulfillment was what we did. So we didn't go out to the market and get customers ourselves. Our customers came to us through partners, and the partners were the likes of the aggregators. So, you know, the names you'll have heard of, the Money Supermarket, Compare the Market, ClearScore, those sorts of guys. So what we needed to do, we had two customers that we had to look after. One was the borrower, and one was the aggregator partner who trusted us with their customers. And so technology helped us to, first of all, appeal to the aggregators because we could adopt technology-based solutions that allowed their customers to fit into a digital journey, which is what they wanted. But it also allowed us to drive that efficiency, which meant that we could return a good remuneration back to those guys for having created the customer inquiry for us in the first place, whilst also fulfilling their customer requirements in the most efficient way that we could. And off the back of that, you end up then generating, as you referred to, the Trustpilot reviews, because people, that was quick, that was easy, that was simple, that wasn't as painless as I thought it was going to be. And so when you look at the Trustpilot reviews that we get, only a small proportion of them mention technology, because there's an assumption that technology will exist to support a process. What most of them talk about is lack of friction, ease, speed, communication, ability to see exactly know what's going on. And what we've done is use technology to drive that customer outcome in terms of the way that they feel about the process. That then drives the customer reviews. That then drives the confidence for someone to use us. And it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So technology was not the be all and the end all, and we weren't a fintech business. We used that to support the journey and to help develop the business. But we always saw ourselves as fulfillment. Let's fulfill the customer's needs. Let's fulfill our partners' needs who give us the customers in the first place. How do we do that? Technology is the way to drive the efficiency.
Brilliant. So as a kind of leader of that business and that environment, obviously a lot of that tech didn't exist or was in its really early days back in 2008. So what were your specific focuses when you sat there? How did you decide that that's where we want the business to be?
So if you look at the efficiency part, so let's look at the customer bit first of all, and the market that we're in is mortgages, in fact, regulated mortgages, although part of it is about second charge mortgages, which people will know as secured loans. Any sort of mortgage product that you get, there's going to be a timescale. It's not like an unsecured loan that's practically instant these days where you can do a few clicks online. There is a time taken to evolve through this process. That might be anything from 30 days through to 6 or 9 months, over a year in the case of a purchase mortgage. But one of the things that frustrated all of us when we were first doing this was that anybody who's ever been through a mortgage process will know it's bloody painful. And most of the pain is created by the customer not knowing what's going on. So what's the problem you're trying to solve? The problem is transparency and openness. And so what we'd had for a number of years, even before Fluent in the previous business, but we carried the concept across, was the ability for a customer to look over our shoulders, if you like, when we were doing the transaction. So almost like they could see exactly what we were doing. We gave them access to our internal CRM and allowed them to see exactly what we were writing as we were making notes and doing stuff. They could see it. They could see whether or not our employees were sat at the desks. So is it worth calling them? Because they're not at the desk. So if they're not at the desk, I'm not going to bother calling them. I'll send them a message instead. So we used that as a way of giving the customer the confidence that they could look over the shoulder. So it wasn't tech for the sake of it. This was all about what is the customer need that we're trying to solve? How do we go about solving that? And that was one of the big things. The other things that we looked at was the areas of the business that were repetitive and unnecessary from a human point of view. So things like product selection. So again, in the mortgage market, you have to give advice on the product that you are going to sell to the customer. And to do that, you've got to trawl through a load of lender products, and they're not easy to navigate. And certainly the one part of the market we majored on when we started back in 2008, there was no software to allow you to do that. So we built our own. And this was all about really analysing what the lender products were, categorising them, then allowing the user, our advisor, to filter stuff intelligently along with some criteria alongside. So you could say, okay, that's the cheapest product that Nigel could have, but hang on a sec, Nigel lives on a farm, and this lender doesn't like lending on farms. So
things against farmers now.
Yeah, nothing exactly. Agricultural restrictions are the issues. So there was a need, and if you think about that, that's a very time-consuming and repetitive process. And unless you've got years of experience and you can remember all this sort of stuff, anybody coming in fresh would take months and months and months to train. So we looked at it and said, how do we automate? How do we allow people to come in and give advice without having those years and years and years of product knowledge? That's the way that you do it. So technology for us was always about problem solving to reduce friction, and try to make us efficient, better, quicker, more transparent, and ultimately give the customer a better journey.
Brilliant. Okay. No. So how has AI changed that in recent years? Is that part of the process now?
Well, so not yet, but it's going to be very soon. So AI, the problem with AI is that people use AI. So AI is a label. Very few people understand what AI is and what the current definition of AI is.
I'm glad you said that, because just about everybody now says, oh, AI technology, and you're thinking, that's just what they were doing 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. It does wind me up a little bit because they just throw that AI badge on and say, oh, it's got AI, it must be good. No, that's not the case. I'll give you an example to show you what I'm talking about in terms of AI. So in the mortgage press just recently, there was a firm called Kudu, and they announced that they'd got a chatbot, or an LLM, a large language model, which is what ChatGPT is, to pass CMAP. Now, CMAP, for those of you who are not involved in the mortgage industry, CMAP is Certificate of Mortgage Advice and Practice, which is the ability for you, from a regulatory perspective, to give mortgage advice. So they got this chatbot to pass CMAP. So in theory, the chatbot could give mortgage advice, except it couldn't, because the CMAP certificate is a multiple choice type exam. So, but interestingly, of the five commercially available chatbots that were capable of doing this, plus the one these guys built, only 2 of them actually passed the exam. So when you go AI is really intelligent. No, it's not. 4 of them couldn't pass it. So you have to look at what you're asking AI to do. So AI, people perceive, is something like ChatGPT. That's the popular one everybody's heard of. You can ask ChatGPT, please can you write me a 1,000-word essay on William Shakespeare? Click, and it will do it for you, because it is a large language model. So what it can do is search its database of information, and it can craft, using its language knowledge of how grammatically you build up a concept of a sentence and a paragraph in English, and then you present it to the user, and they think, oh, that's really impressive, that's fantastic. What it can't do is pick out the best mortgage product for you, for example, because there are too many variable inputs, and some of them sometimes are around emotion. So if you're very risk averse as a potential borrower, you might want a longer fixed term rate. If you a little bit more, okay, no, do you know what, I'll take a chance because it's a bit cheaper, I'll have a 2-year fixed rate. AI can't do that right now. So there's a limitation to what AI can do. What it can do is simple tasks. So for example, for us, we're looking at, when we give mortgage advice, we have to give a written letter called an advice and suitability letter. And it basically says, Nigel, we're going to recommend this mortgage to you, and here's the reasons why. It takes into account your circumstances, what your thoughts and desires are, what your aims are in terms of what you're trying to achieve with this mortgage. Now, the reality is that actually what we could do is just pop a couple of little bullet point words into that and have ChatGPT write it for us. So that's what we're doing. So what that does is it saves that drudgery bit, if you like, of we have paralegals who write these on behalf of the advisors. The advisor writes a few notes, the paralegal translates it into a written statement. So there is things there that you can bring in which helps you to get more efficient in terms of what AI can give you. And there's no doubt that if you look at the mortgage market specifically and you play forward 10 years or so, there might be some advice, some sort of advice being given subject to the regulator by AI. But yeah, people get a little bit carried away as to what AI is and what it can do. ChatGPT is just a big database of words, and it understands how to construct answers and sentences, and that's it. It can't fly a plane.
Yeah. But you see it in the future becoming far more important as part of a digital business.
I think in our business, if you look at most businesses, doesn't matter what market you're in, there's an element to which, apart from perhaps Amazon, there's an element to which human interaction between the customer and the firm itself is really vital and important. There are some elements that you would never want to take away, even if you could. And so the way we look at it is, if we could get to a point where to transact a mortgage, instead of requiring a minimum of 3 frontline staff to do that in their specialties, plus all the support teams that are involved, could we have that done by one person? Because actually AI and tech can take care of some of the simple repetitive processes prior to and after giving advice. And we think that's possible. So, for example, today, one of our advisors can give 3 pieces of advice, if you like, 3 pieces of mortgage advice per day, that sort of number. Could they deliver 10 in 10 years' time because all the rest of the stuff's been taken out of the way and they are literally just saying, this is the right one for you and here's the reason why? Yes, we could get to that, but we are a number of years away from that yet.
Okay, really interesting. Thank you. So in the business now, how many people do you have in the tech team? What's the makeup of that?
34.
Okay.
I should be up there. They actually sit just out there, so I don't know. There's about, it's either 34 or 35. So it's quite a sizable chunk as for the size of our business. It's around about 8% of the headcount that is in our technology stack. But that's because the technology is so important, central to what we do. We write our own software, we build our own systems. We don't use third party apart from the standard stuff like Microsoft 365, right? It's pointless writing your own email system. It doesn't achieve anything. But everything else we do is transacted by our internal software. So we have that higher IT headcount as a proportion of our business because it's so important to what we do. What it does do is it increases cost around the IT part of it, but it's dragged so much efficiency through the rest of the business that actually we can transact more cases with fewer heads in the primary part of the business, the customer-facing business, if you like. And that technology cost helps to keep that efficiency there, helps to keep the headcount down.
Yeah, great. So it interests me, particularly our sort of area of businesses, utilities. So we're dealing with big multinationals. They've got lots of layers of directors, management, and decision making, and you're kind of moving into that now, aren't you? So you've got 4 founders. You've then got a fairly extensive management team, lots of managing directors of different areas. So how, as a business, do you go about making decisions and empowering people to take those, particularly around that tech innovation and so on? What's the process, and how do you make sure people can make the right decisions at the right time in your business?
So from our point of view, we've got 4 trading businesses. We refer to Fluent Money. That's just the brand, if you like. There are actually four trading businesses, all supported by a single IT group function. But each trading business has its own managing director, if you like, its own owner of that particular siloed part of the business. And what we do is we encourage those MDs to talk to IT about what they want. They talk to me as well, but they also talk to IT about what they want, the developments that they want and the things they want to achieve. And so we have that dialogue between the IT function going on with each of the separate businesses as to what they want to achieve. What we also then get is the various MDs to talk to each other, because we use one CRM. But although the firms, if you like, have a different view of that CRM. So if you're a mortgage employee, your screens will look slightly different to if you're a bridging loan employee, but it's the same CRM. So what we find is that we have software development that one person could come up with the idea of that actually reads across all the businesses. And so when we look at what we want from tech, we've got some great blue sky ideas. Wouldn't it be great if? And then we've got some bug fixes and just general updates. But in the middle of that, you've got what I call the important bit, which is the stuff you can deliver in a 12-month period. Okay, it's outside of strategic thinking. It's just borderline tactical thinking. And what we do is we get the MDs to talk to tech, but to talk to each other and to see if there are any common ideas or goals that they can share in terms of what development can look like. And we have, most businesses who are involved in tech will be familiar with sprints. And at each of our sprints, the MDs who've got code in development in that particular sprint will be part of that sprint. So we make them aware of what's going on week by week. They have to attend. If they've got code being written by a particular team, they have to attend those sprint meetings to understand what is being talked about and what is being developed. And that helps us because we keep the business really, really close to the developers in that ongoing sense. It helps the developers to understand exactly what the business need is, but the business then sees exactly how long it takes to build something. And you get this really, really good interaction where there's a sense between everybody of what we're trying to achieve, but there's a sense also of the timescales that it can be done in. So we don't tend to get much friction between, I want something in a week, and IT say, no, it's 3 months. There's more of an understanding of where that sits in terms of development time.
Yeah.
The other thing that it gives us, which is really, really good, is because we have all the MDs talking like that. We also look out into the backlog and we say, what job is more important? And the MDs themselves decide what job is more important. So one might go, do you know what? I can see a much bigger benefit to the group for you to have that bit of software than for me to have this bit that I want. So I'll let mine drop back in the queue. And what you get there is not a top-down approach where somebody higher up who may not be as close to the business says, we'll have that one done because I quite like the sound of that one. Actually, the businesses are all agreeing and collaborating on what gets done with what priority, based purely on where they can see group benefit.
So by the sounds of it, you're reviewing it from a time frame basis constantly. You talked about long-term and short-term within there, but then also managing it in terms of what's the biggest bang for the buck.
Exactly.
For the business.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody will get. So let's say, for example, this is not a great example, but if we're a regulated business regulated by the FCA, let's say, for example, the FCA brings out a new bit of regulation that requires us to do X, Y, and Z. That's going to trump anything that's going to be a business benefit because it's a regulatory benefit. So everybody understands there are certain things that have to happen because they have to happen, not necessarily because they're great for the business or that's how it should work. So there's also an understanding there of how the prioritization works, and it's a collaborative prioritization. So we tend, because it's a collaborative prioritization, you get the dev teams not feeling like they're doing something which is going to annoy somebody. They're going to get shouted at. Why have you done my bit of work yet? Because of that collaborative approach, it's a very, very, everybody works together, and you have that understanding from the devs that what they're doing is creating stuff. There's a value to it. They can see the value because they're involved in discussions with the business. They're not just writing code for the sake of it. So you have that integration where everybody understands what everybody's doing. Everybody understands why you're doing it, and everybody understands the priority for doing it.
Yeah.
And that helps us to develop stuff quicker, and the business to understand what the development backlog looks like.
Sounds good. So what have you done as a leader to foster that environment? It doesn't just happen, does it? In most businesses, it's friction.
For a certain size of business, the best advice I would offer is get yourself a decent CTO. Spend money on a good CTO. Our CTO was ex We Buy Any Car. And he came to, everybody's heard of We Buy Any Car.
Steve, is it? Steve?
That's Steve, yeah. Nobody's heard of Fluent. But we got Steve in, and Steve got very excited by what we could do. If you look at the scope of the work that he could implement. And Steve's really very good, and he changed the structure that we had. Part of it is the ability for me to go in and go, no, I know what code is, right? I might not know that particular bit of code, but don't be telling me that it can't do this because I know it can. So there was an honesty there which came from, don't you devs think you can have one over on me because you can talk in all these acronyms that I don't understand. I do understand some of them. Yeah. Right, okay, so we've got to be honest with him. And it was the honesty that was the key. So, and this was the same thing with Steve. A good CTO who knows how to run a tight ship in terms of keeping devs motivated and having them understand what the business wants is crucial. And that's what Steve brought to us. But having, from a leadership point of view, be able to go in and say to everybody, look, we're not here. You're not here in this department to write code, and you're not here to ask for jobs. We're here to develop a business together. So don't be pulling the wool over each other's eyes. Don't be making out that a job is more important than it really is just because you think that's the only way you're going to get to the front of the queue. And devs, don't be making out it's more difficult than it really is, because we don't understand. We as the business don't understand difficult. We just understand need, right? So when you get that honesty between the business and the IT function, if you can generate that honesty, and that was part of my job, not just bringing Steve in, but also looking at how everyone worked together. If you can generate that honesty, then I believe you can generate a far more efficient tech and business integration solution and moving forward.
Great, thank you. So I mean, this comes on to kind of recruitment, really. We've just talked about that. For any business, attracting, retaining top talent, especially as there's such a shortage in this area at the moment. So what approaches have you guys found successful recruiting, nurturing, and then holding on to them? Because there's always someone offering a bit more.
There is. If you're talking, I mean, so there's two things here. There's the general business we have, obviously, as our business, we have the general business, we have some non-qualified staff. We have qualified staff in terms of regulatory advice. We have specialists like the finance team. And then you have techs who are incredibly specialist. So if it's tech that we're talking about, and I suspect that it is, then not everything's about money, believe it or not. That's not for every developer, because for some of them that's all it's about. And there's a lot of contractors out there who go, look at my day rate, aren't I great? Go on then, off you go. If you've got no pride about what it is that you're writing, that you can't engage in the product that you're writing, you really are a slave just to the dollar. So we're not looking for that sort of person. We're looking for the person that enjoys what they do. So what we want to do is create an environment where they can really enjoy what they do, where they can develop as individuals as well, and maybe learn new skills. And we will try and get them. We will try and facilitate training, not just in the languages that they're specialist in, but in other languages that might be interesting. That they might not need for their job right now, but it broadens them as individuals.
Well, they're getting personal development as well as...
Yes. So we will bring in a couple of our devs were not classically trained. They were actually our first line support guys who said, I want to have a go at that. Okay. You as a person, as a personality, with all your drivers, we believe that we believe in you, so we'll support you in doing it. So to the limited degree that we can, we will bring individuals on from things like first line. One of our developers was actually a mortgage advisor.
Does that bring benefits later on down the line because they better understand the business that they're then writing code for?
Yeah, it's not. I think you're right. The better understanding the business, but also it's actually being loyal to the business is the wrong word, but they're engaged. So you could go and write code for anybody else, but no, I like Fluent. I want to stay in the family. So what I'll do is I'll transfer internally. So that's important, right? The ability to offer people a training path through, if you like. But of course, that doesn't always work. So you have to recruit people with specialties into the business. And we don't pay the most and we don't pay the least. But what we try and do is allow people to enjoy themselves while they're doing their job. So off the back of the wonderful global pandemic, our devs no longer work from the office. They predominantly work from home, but they are required to attend the office once a fortnight minimum, but they all attend together in their teams. So there's that, we foster that team environment. We also encourage them to communicate a lot, as much as they can, via Teams itself as a software product. So they will be talking to each other. They're not just sitting there in a dark corner as people perceive that devs do, in a darkened room and getting on with it. We encourage communication. So we're looking for an individual in terms of developer who's not a slave to the dollar, who's not going to pop off next week and go and do contracting. We're looking for somebody who wants some personal development and somebody who wants to enjoy the job, and we can give them an atmosphere that they can grow in. And that's what we try and do. We try and foster that, because you pay top dollar, you don't always get the best people. You just get people who want the top dollar, not necessarily the people who want to do the job because they enjoy doing the job.
Yeah. And you get the longevity, I guess, with
you do get the longevity, and we don't always get it right. And we do a bit of a turn on some of the developers. We don't always get it right, but we have got some very, very long term. We've got one developer who's been with us since day one, since 2008. So he was one of the 20 employees that we started with, which is that's pretty good. We've got another developer who started in 2010, who's been with us since that date. And I think the average
Gary, 2008.
Gary's the 2008, and my son is the 2010. He's still here. Now you can go, oh right, nepotism. No. He's head of development of our internal CRM system because he's good, not because he's my son, because I find him mildly annoying. So if it was down to me, maybe he wouldn't be. But this is as an employer, you need to try and be as inclusive as possible. People who maybe, haven't got, with a developer, what's more important? Is it code writing skills, or is it personality? Well, we say it's both. Because if you don't have that personality, if you're just going to sit and write code, you're not part of what we try to foster, which is that inclusivity between the business and the developers. And we want and encourage developers to talk to the business. So we need people to be people, as well as just being an asset in terms of code writing.
So how did the COVID pandemic change working environment? How do you operate? Was it like most businesses, what do we do now? How do we... Because you've got a pretty big office environment and everyone was all on one site.
Yeah, so we've got two offices now. I'm in the new one. So we've got two sites about a mile down the road from each other. But if we go back to when the global pandemic happened, I'd love to say forward thinking, but we were quite fortunate that actually our systems, as we built them, allowed us to work remotely. The only thing we had. Doing that.
Your devs teams weren't working at home.
No, everybody. We didn't have any remote workers, but we built the software such that we could. But we've done that from a disaster recovery point of view, not from a business strategy point of view. So we went out and got ourselves the disaster recovery ISO standard, and this was part of what we'd done and what we developed. And so all we had to do, he says, when the pandemic started and we had some people working from home, was buy 200 laptops. Because our systems were not full box PC, they were NUC, the Intel NUCs, the little sort of cigarette packet sized computers that attach to the back of your screen. But we needed laptops, so we went out and bought ourselves 200 laptops, and that was it. We were working remotely, so and we didn't have any issues, but we were fairly fortunate in that because we'd done this disaster recovery look forward a couple of years before. Yeah. We actually ran a disaster recovery scenario. As part of our standard, we had to do some testing. And one of the tests was, well, here's 15 random scenarios. Let's pick a scenario. And one of those was global pandemic. And we went, no. Let's have another one. Let's have a flood in the building, right? And then bizarrely, 6 months later, the pandemic happened. So we were okay. We actually went paperless 3 months before the pandemic. So we switched off. We went from, I'm going to say, we went down to about 4% of our paper consumption that we were doing beforehand. We dropped down to about 4%, and even that was still some fat to come out of that. So when the pandemic hit, reality was we were down at something like 2% of our previous peak paper consumption. So there was still a little bit of paper you need to produce. So we still had the occasional person on premise, but people were sitting 50 feet away from each other. So we weren't entirely paperless, but that was just fortuitous. That wasn't not to say that was planning; it was fortuitous. So actually, it didn't affect us when we came back after COVID. We didn't have the challenge that some businesses had in terms of getting staff back in the office, because from our staff, we tried to engender that sort of family feel about being in work and about enjoying work. And so people were desperate to come back into work. The only thing we did do was we allowed some of our support teams to work in a hybrid fashion. So dev guys, like I said, they work remotely. Some of our finance team work on a hybrid basis. Some of our compliance team work on a hybrid basis, 2 days out, 3 days in. But the actual operational customer-facing staff, well, I say customer-facing, it's all telephony, but the customer operational staff, they're all 100% back on-prem now. But the one thing we do know now, that if anything else happened or the building burnt down, we're entirely devoid of a requirement to have that building. We can operate remotely if that's what we choose to do.
Okay. So everything's now on the system. So share some insights, if you would, in the role of data analytics in guiding how you lead business then.
So reporting was something we were never particularly good. That's not true. We produced reports, right? But they weren't done in a very efficient way. So one of the things Steve brought with him was the passion to create a BI, a business intelligence department, which we'd never had before. So we've got, I think, 6 guys in BI. So a couple of those are database maintenance, health monitoring, efficiency, but the remainder of them just write reports and analyze data. And we have an analyst as well in the finance team, which is something we'd never had before. How important is that? We thought, when you think you know your business, you don't know anything until you start to get some BI guys in. Then you start to understand your business. So
give me some examples of how that's led to changes in operations, things you've done.
Yeah. So there's certain things in the data that you don't expect to see, because you make an assumption about how you operate your business, and you think, oh, I'll look at a bit of data. Yeah, that looks okay. It always looks like that. Until you start looking at large data sets, you can fool yourself into thinking that something's happening, because you tend to look at a daily report or a weekly report, maybe a monthly report, but you don't always. We tend to look at in-flight transactions. So you're looking at a live customer, shall we say, customer who we've spoken to. There's lots of customers we don't speak to, because they'll make an inquiry and then think, oh, actually, no, I'm not quite ready yet. So what the BI guys gave us was the ability to look not only at the entire data set that we've got and how that data set behaves, but also look at how a case transacts through the business and the time frame that it takes. Again, we looked at things like days to complete. What the BI guys allowed us to do was to see actually how long we were taking to perform certain tasks. So you look at that and you go, well, actually, when you do some analysis on this, actually that person can perform that task in X minutes. That person takes 3 times as long. Why? Now, you can't normally see that in data in terms of case transactions, because that's not what you're looking at. But these guys were looking at the data at a database transactional level and going, look, this click here happened here, this click happened here, this is the time taken. So when we started looking at it, we were actually looking at, there's a vast difference between how long it takes to perform a task. So what that allowed us to do was go back to the business and say why. And it turns out that it was because we were allowing people to do tasks in different ways. So if you're going to send a message to somebody from us to a borrower, you do it through our CRM, it's instant. It's a couple of letters, click, off it goes. But if you wanted to do that through Outlook, let's say, you fire Outlook up, you've got to copy and paste the email address into Outlook for the customer. You've maybe got to drag a document in, get it out of a database repository, put it onto your desktop, drag it in. And you've achieved the same thing. You've sent an email with an attachment, right? But one takes 2 minutes and one takes 8 minutes. And unless you have the correct, unless you have the ability to look at that data on that sort of minute by minute transactional basis, and you never do that unless you get a BI team in, and the sort of reporting those guys can provide for us, then it's really, really hard to go back and do that sort of look at your business unless you've got an idea something's going wrong and you're sitting there with a stopwatch. So that's the sort of thing that the BI guys gave us, the BI team, and the ability to analyze data to that level. That's one example of what it gave us.
Brilliant. No, that's really good, mate. Perhaps we ought to get you in charge of the NHS sometimes. Look at a couple of efficiencies there.
I think, honestly, I look at that sometimes and I think anybody from the corporate world could probably go in there and revolutionize what they do pretty quickly. It's not quite as simple as that. It's never going to be, because, of course, I'm sure they have all sorts of structural issues, and I mean that in terms of the different NHS providers, system providers. They have all sorts of structural issues which slow them down. But I do look at stuff sometimes and think, you're really not doing this the best way, are you? No. There's got to be a better way of doing this.
There's got to be a better way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's one for another day, maybe. So, look, we've been on quite some time now. One last little question then. So, have you ever read any self-improvement, leadership books? I think I know the answer to this. But if not, who are the role models?
You know what? I tried one once and I didn't like it. No, I think most of the stuff that you get in these, this is personal opinion, most of the stuff in these leadership books is absolute garbage. It's stuff that you can, but I say that from, and maybe I'm fortunate, maybe my experience, my upbringing, maybe has given me a certain insight into what I think is the right way to behave. And there may be a number of people who've not had that experience who want to be able to, how do I do it? How do I become a leader? And so there will be some good stuff in there that there will be. I just don't. I don't read it. Never have done. Don't want to. Doesn't interest me. Who are the role models? I don't really have role models as such in a business sense. For me, again, maybe, and I hope this doesn't come across as arrogant, but maybe because the different environments I've worked in, the different firms I've worked for, and the different approaches I've seen, have allowed me to see what I think has been a good outcome and what I think has been a not so good outcome. And so the only the role model, if you like, there has been the experience of seeing good and seeing not so good and choosing to operate in a way that looks like good. The only role modeling, put aside role modeling and say, as a leader, how do you treat staff and how do you motivate staff? Put yourself in their position and ask, what would it feel like to experience what I'm expecting them to do? What does it feel like in terms of communications that you send? What does it feel like to operate in that environment? And if you can say, I'd be happy doing that, then that's fine. If there's anything you wouldn't be happy doing and you think to yourself, I wouldn't want to sit over there and do that job day in, day out, then, why are you asking somebody else to?
Don't ask them.
So for me, role modeling is not as important as actually empathizing for the people that you're talking to. And I think if you can get them in a good position where you would be happy doing that job, you're doing the right thing in terms of showing leadership for a business. Personal opinion.
Great. Thank you very much. No, I appreciate all your honesty and your time on the call today.